Welcome to Permission to Kick Ass, the show that gives you a virtual seat at the bar for the real conversations that happen between entrepreneurs. I'm interviewing all kinds of business owners, from those just a few years into freelancing to CEOs helming 9-figure companies. If you've ever worried that everyone else just seems to get it and you're missing something or messing things up, this show is for you. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and let's get to it. Hey, and welcome back to Permission to Kick Ass. With me today is my new friend, Kaci Ackerman. Say hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about your business and what you do.
Yeah, of course. So again, my name is Kaci Ackerman, and I am a ClickUp expert, and I specialize in building out ClickUp for service-based businesses. And I also have a background in management with businesses and systems and creation and stuff like that.
Nice. That's so important. I know that I work with and I coach a lot of creative freelancers, folks that, typically rebel against the idea of systems and feels like it's a little bit too constraining. Actually, I would argue that creativity loves constraints and that you have a process whether you think you do or not.
They always have a process.
It's just that you may be resisting documenting it, which could actually make your life a hell of a lot easier, but we won't go maybe we will go down that rat path later. But I don't know, like systems it's so important to the creative process. And I know that a lot of the frustrations, especially on the freelance side, like I work with a lot of copywriters, a lot of graphic designers, folks that do service-based businesses, they get into trouble with communications with their clients. And I tell them, part of that is just keeping in regular communication as you're following the steps of the process and reminding them, okay, so we're at this step. This is what I need from you. Okay, so we're at this step. This is what I need from you. But if you don't actually have these processes outlined, it's really hard for you to explain it in a way that's comforting to the client. And then they wind up wigging out. Is that something you would agree with?
Yeah. And it's so, like you said, a lot of times they do have a process. It's just in their head. And oftentimes it is so confined and dependent on them to where that's where we kind of switch gears and change things. Because I would totally agree. Like they have the process, it's in their head, but then their entire business is just dependent on them. And they have no way to, if they want to grow or if they want to just not work as much, they don't really have that option because it's so constraining on their creativity. But what's interesting is when I work with them, it often opens up like, well, I do all of these extra things that have nothing to do with writing. And I'm like, okay, why are you doing them?
Right?
Like we can
stay in your zone of genius.
We can, yes. And that's one thing like I love doing. And a reason I am who I am and what I do is because for me, it's a challenge. I get to build something custom for every single person I work with. And it definitely keeps me on my toes of their process and how to make their process easier for them and put it into a system to allow them, to save time or hire somebody to offload some of it. Different, there's different options based off where you're at, but that's why I love what I do because I get to like listen to them talk and I'm like, okay, we can do X, Y, and Z, and then you will save all of your Friday.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That is something that I have been working really hard. Well, I've got a new business partner of the last 6 months, and I've been working I'm the operations person and she's the visionary. And we have been working on putting some systems in place that allowed us to take Thanksgiving week off. And short version of that is the system is deciding in advance. We're off the week of Thanksgiving. We will make all of the work fit into the remaining time that is not Thanksgiving week. That is a system and a process too. And it started with when we were onboarding people in like August, September, telling them, by the way, we take this holiday off and we take this holiday off. If you don't take those holidays off, we highly recommend it. But no shade here. Do what you do. We will be unavailable that week. And so like systems can be simple. It's real easy to kind of get in your head and think a little bit too much about it if you're not a systems type person.
Yes. And there is a thing of over organization or over systemizing things if you don't have the brain for it.
Oh, yes. And it's funny because I was actually talking yesterday with a friend she was thinking about starting a podcast. And so she wanted to ask me about mine. I'm like, I'm far from an expert. Here's this course that I took that I recommend because it walks you through all the basics. But then I started showing her all of these systems that I've created around the production about it. I think I've mentioned it maybe a time or two on the podcast, but we've got it to a point where I show up on Wednesdays and I record and I get to have fantastic conversations with lovely people. And then my VA takes over and moves those files over to the editor, who takes it and makes it sound freaking awesome, who passes it to the writer, who does all the show notes and the graphics and the programming of the email. And all I have to do is come in and say, approved, do some edits here, and then it goes out and I get to have the most fun just having the conversations, and everything else happens without me. But that wasn't something that I started with. In fact, the thing that I had to focus on the most when I started the show was just reaching out to people and say, hey, I'm starting a show. Would you be a guest?
Yeah. Yeah. But you even need a process for that, right? Because you have to collect info from the guest. You have to make sure that they have the Zoom link. You have to make sure that they know what kind of audio they need to have, the quiet, like I love the email that you send out ahead of time because it, specifically states like, make sure you're in a quiet area, make sure you have good audio, make sure you're not having, like construction being done on your walls, like,
or thunderstorms moving through with the open window like I'm dealing with right now.
But all of that is a process and a system. And the best part about it is, I'm assuming, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but once you put it in place, it's automated. So you are not having to worry about sending out that email, the night before, because all of it's automated. So now you are taking the, if you will, fun, exciting part of the podcast, which, like you said, is doing what you're doing right now. And you get to offload the rest of it and not worry about the rest of it because it's all in a system, a process. Everyone knows what they need to be doing, when it's due, and when it goes live, and all those pieces. And like you said, you're just here to approve or make some edits.
Yeah. And it was interesting. Like, there's two things that I want to bring up with that. One was that I noticed that I had to come up with a process when I found myself, I want to say it was probably like episode 20. It was early on in the show, but I found myself on I released these on like Tuesday at midnight. It's an arbitrary time that I came up with, but it's something that I published and I like hold myself to with public peer pressure. So I do that. And I find myself on like Tuesday evening, sitting down frantically trying to write all of the show assets and get all the graphics created. And I had a moment of frustration that night where I was just like, what the hell is stopping me right now? I am a writer by trade. Why am I having so much trouble putting my butt in a chair and writing something awesome about this show that I'm incredibly passionate about releasing into the world? What is the blocker? So like in a moment of frustration, I sat down and made like a 20-minute super rambly video where I just went from start to finish for my VA, who was also a systems person, and said, this is what I do step by step to get an episode published. Help. And doing that actually gave me a lot of clarity because I realized that one of the things that was holding me back from actually producing this was that in my mind, I had 4 big steps: find guest, record, edit, publish. And I was ignoring all of the little steps that happen in each of those categories. And so when all of those little steps that I was not acknowledging were adding up, I was getting stressed, overwhelmed, feeling rushed, feeling unprepared. And then the other piece of it, once I started to get these systems in place, which I definitely relied on my VA to like help me parse that rambly video down into a series of steps, was that it allowed us to look at places where there were bottlenecks and alleviate those bottlenecks systematically. Like, we definitely didn't go from one rambly 20-minute stressed out video at 9:00 at night to the system that I've got today. But it was a series of steps over time where we're realizing, okay, at this step, when somebody is booking their appointment, that's when we can get their bio, their answers to these questions, their headshot, all of this stuff that we're going to need so that we don't have to come back to this later, a week before it goes out, and like stress out that we don't have the assets. We just have them up front. And another thing that we talked about before the call was that I added questions to the intake form right before you book your recording spot. And I said, 9 times out of 10, I don't even follow the questions there. They're there because I started to recognize that my guests needed the questions to feel comfortable and feel prepared for the show. And then when they had answered those questions and we knew kind of what we were going to talk about, they were much more comfortable with my format, which is to just follow the conversation wherever it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know we're talking specifically about, podcast and producing a podcast, but I love that you mentioned all of the small steps that go into the big steps. And I talk about this all the time. And my favorite example with this also is social media. So people like dread social media, right? And it's because they more than likely have something on their to-do list that says make content
Yep.
or, like create social media posts. And that is such a big task that you keep putting off. Like, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that next week. I'll do that next month. And then you're months, down the road with no content out there, and you're not, making those relationships and connections and stuff. And so it's the same idea though, of understanding that there's so many smaller steps that go along with that.
Yep.
And the best part about finding those smaller steps is you uncover the areas that you don't need to be in.
Yes.
So for instance, like with yours, you've streamlined so much of it now, like you said, where you basically just record and the rest is offloaded. But if you're not at that point, let's take again social media, for example, you don't need to schedule your content.
Yep.
So when you start to unravel the actual idea of like make content or, so create social media, you start to see those pieces where like, oh, I could hire somebody, 15 hours a month, 20 hours a month to come in and help me with these little pieces. And that unloads so much of not only your time, but your energy and your brain power that you are now connecting with new people. You now have the energy to go foster new relationships. You have the energy to sign new clients because you're not bogged down with all of these pieces that don't serve you, or that you feel like this is so daunting, I just am not going to do it. And I'm going to stay stuck forever,
Yes.
which we all know does not move your business forward.
It was interesting. I was on a podcast yesterday, actually, where I was talking about kind of simplicity and ease and why you don't have to create something that's 100% new, never been seen before in order to be a standout. And we talked about this concept that I just kind of like invented off the cuff. I'm sure it's out there as like an official term or something, but how we have nickel and diming ourselves into a bad financial situation where we take on, tiny payment until we're paying thousands of dollars a month. I feel like we do that with our production as well in terms of business. Like, I can't tell you how many people, and like, these are professional people that do email marketing or social media marketing for a living. And when it comes to their own business, it's a cobbler's kid situation where it's like, all right, well, I'll just wake up tomorrow and I'll write an email because I need to write a daily email. And then tomorrow they wake up and one of the kids is sick and like the power goes out and a whole bunch of things that distract them. And then they wind up not writing that email. And then it just kind of snowballs from there. And I suspect, to me, it's because like we add a bunch of small tasks like that to our plates that require a lot of task switching and jumping from, okay, well, it'll be a quick email, so I'll do that. Then it'll be a quick social post, and then I'll do that. And then like, that's just hours of your morning gone without you even realizing it. Is that something that you've noticed?
Yes. And I preach all the time, having a dedicated space or time in the week to actually work on your business for those pieces. Often the term is a CEO day. And really what that comes down to is you are carving out dedicated time in your week to focus on your business. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to create a month's worth of content or, write 20 emails in that day. That's where you get to break down those pieces. So maybe maybe your CEO day is going to be Fridays from 8 to noon. Maybe that's, you have 4 hours. So on the first Friday of the month, you're going to just plan out your content. That's it.
Yeah.
You're just going to plan. And that's such a small task. And maybe you decide to write 2 emails. Typically on my CEO days, I like to write 2 emails. So I'm kind of 2 weeks ahead, and I feel good about it. Because if I do miss a Monday, mine are on Monday, but if I do miss a Monday, I don't feel so rushed and anxious, about getting things done. And so then, the next CEO day, you write a couple more emails and you also start to create your content, or you write copy, or you do pieces of it, but it all circles back to where at the end of the month, your content is created and scheduled and done. And, your emails are written and tested out and ready to go. And so that is where I feel it's really important, is actually carving out that time. And the kicker is, though, to holding boundaries with yourself, which I know as business owners, that's really hard, especially when we're at home and we have life and we could be doing other things. But what's really important, and it took even me time, to get this way, outside of my CEO hours, I do not work on my business.
Interesting.
It is not Not a thing. So for instance, my schedule right now is Mondays are my CEO day. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday are client related or like, this like recording stuff, different stuff like that. And then Fridays is what I would call like a personal day. And basically I just don't work, or I do if I want to, or I go run my errands or whatever. So I have a schedule that works really well for me. And the point is I work, if you will, really hard Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, so that I can have the flexibility in the rest of the week.
Yes. And that was a concept that I rebelled against for a while. I love, I wrote this down and I circled it, that you wrote feeling rushed and anxious if you had to sit down Monday morning and come up with that email. And I feel like that is something that we don't really talk about enough in entrepreneurship. And the fact that you can't create your best work from a rushed and anxious state of mind. That is just kind of a good enough is good enough, which there's nothing wrong with that. If you have to go with good enough is good enough, fine. And no self-judgment. No, this is permission to kick ass. We don't judge here, even on crappy days, on down days, on days when we're feeling especially human. But if you can prevent yourself from having to create in an anxious space all the time, build that space in. And that ties into the second idea, which was that I rebelled for years against themed days or time blocks. I felt like that would box me in and trap me, and that I wouldn't be able to come up with all the creative ideas that I need to come up with. But the funny thing is that like putting gates around that time and saying, this is focus time, this is call time, this is recording day, actually freed me up. And I have actually a very similar schedule to you, which I don't take calls on Mondays or Fridays. And Tuesday and Thursday are like coaching calls that I do with clients. Wednesday is podcast recording day, and that's it. That's awesome, because it means if there's a random Wednesday where nobody books the time, which happens every once in a while, I got Wednesday off to do whatever I want to, catch up on work, anything. But it's all, it's freed up so much of my time because I don't have all of these thoughts constantly competing for my attention going, you need to do this and you need to do that. Okay, well, podcast stuff, that is Wednesday. Today is Tuesday. We're not even worrying about that. That's fine. It's been so freeing, which is not something I would have expected before I went through the process.
Yeah. And that's one of my like core values in my business is freedom and growth along with that. And it's interesting because, like you said, a lot of people, especially a lot of creative entrepreneurs, feel that way about time blocking or theme days, that it's very constrictive and they need to be in a very creative mood to write. And I do understand that. But the flip side of that is, what kind of freedom are you creating for yourself when you don't have a schedule? You're actually, if you don't have some sort of structure, like a baseline structure, if you will, you actually are hindering yourself from the freedom that you're searching for, or from the freedom you're wanting, because you wake up every single day and you're like, oh, what am I going to do today? Oh, well, I have all of these tasks, so I guess I'll do those. And then you get distracted with all of these tasks over here. And then you're at your computer for 12 hours and you have no idea what you did all day long.
Right.
And now it comes to the point where you actually are doing the opposite. You are sacrificing your life for your business when it should be the other way around. You should be living your life and your business should be dabbled in there, That's how I want my business anyway. And so it just is interesting. It's a different way of thought. It's a different thought process. And I do think that, there's a reason I'm a very systems operation style. I have not one creative bone in my body.
Hey, there are different types of creativity. Not all of it is related to creating art or music. Being a creative systems person is still being creative. There are creative engineers, creative math.
In my own way.
Yes.
But it just, for me, it's like it's needed, we need me and we need the creative people, and then we come together and hopefully I can make their lives a little easier and show them the areas that they really can. I think there's a lot of mindset blocks too for creative entrepreneurs and all entrepreneurs, but I know we're speaking a lot towards creative. And what I mean by that is because their business is so dependent on their creativity, if you will, of like graphic design or copywriting, those different things, website design, it's really hard for them to see how anyone else can help them.
Yes.
because they are so focused on the fact that they have to write that copy or they have to design this thing. But again, like I said previously, and like you even found when you were starting to, record that stressful video of your podcast, you're seeing all of these small steps that have nothing to do with creativity.
Mm-hmm. They're just production steps, and they don't necessarily require me. Like, I have wonderful friends who have, started podcasts before me. And here's a hint: there's nothing new under the sun. So if there's something that you want to do, and somebody is doing it, or somebody that you kind of know is doing it, reach out and ask if they would be willing to help you. The worst that they can say is, no, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. Here are some resources. Maybe they just say no. But, by good grace, I had a friend who had a podcast, and I reached out to her and I said, help, I don't even know what I don't know. And she was the one that connected me with somebody who created the show graphics, which, by the way, are Canva templates. Mm-hmm. Which is exactly why my writer for the show can just go into my Canva account, create the graphics by swapping out the image and the text, and boom, we're good to go. So is that something that I need to be doing? No. Like that's not, I'm trying to find a graceful way to say it. So just, if I say the words wrong, don't come at me. I don't care. That's something that doesn't require a lot of technical skill. Once you've learned that, it's easily replicable. And that's not necessarily something that I need to solve because it's a unique to Angie approach, right? That is something that just about anybody can do once they're trained.
Right.
And then there was this other concept that you said about, there was two of them. One was creativity and one was fitting business into your life, which I'm super passionate about. But creativity, guys, creativity, the way I see it, is being able to connect two seemingly unrelated ideas or thoughts. That's really what it boils down to, at least in Angie's opinion, which on this show is what matters, right? It's my show. And I've put people through exercises about this, like, tell me what similarities, what things in common you have with a lock and a lamp. And all of a sudden people start to realize, like, these two things that don't seem related have things in common. They're connected in ways that aren't obvious on the surface. They have metal components, right? They have usually some sort of rotating system. You might find both of them at a storage facility. See how creativity works? You start connecting these ideas. And creativity is a discipline. It is a muscle. It needs regular exercise in order to be more effective. And you will see this in prolific writers like Stephen King, prolific artists who sit down and create every day. And that's because part of the creative process, right, is recognizing that not everything that you put out is great. I would say I've gotten pretty good at this point, but it's still kind of like 60-40, that what I write the first time is great. And what I write the first time has maybe the seed of what it's eventually going to become, but is not great. So part of, developing your skill and sitting down at the CEO day and working on your business is building that muscle, that discipline to I'm just going to focus. I'm not going to task switch right now. And I'm going to be okay. At least this is with me. I'm going to be okay with churning out crap, because I know churning out crap is part of the process to getting to that gold nugget that's going to turn into something good. And if I don't sit down and force myself to clear out all the garbage, then I'm never going to find the gold. So,
Yeah, I love that. I totally love that. And it's so true because, you have your dedicated business time and then you come to it the next week, you're refreshed as well. So now you're looking at this and you're like, wait, this doesn't even align with my business. Why did I write that? And you can, edit things and you can get new ideas from it, because then you can, which is another thing that I absolutely love, is you can create new content from something you wrote, last week or whatever, and you pull out like you said, a good nugget, and that's a whole separate post, or it's a reel, or, all those different things that we all do in this online space. But totally, I love that you also know what works for you, which is really important in this business, is understanding what works for you. And I don't take that lightly, because I do believe that you still need a foundation.
Yes.
And a structure of foundation, but you still want to build it for what works for you. So for me, I'm a morning person. I'm not going to go tell every single person, oh, you need to work from, 6 o'clock in the morning until 9, and you're going to be the most productive person ever.
Oh, that prescriptive shit drives me nuts. I am not a morning person.
Right.
And in fact, that's why, on my call days, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, whether it's recording or it's coaching, I don't have a single call that starts before noon. Yeah. I'm not a morning person. And for people that have requested, well, I don't have any time in the afternoons, the times that you gave me on the link, could we do morning? And I make a big joke of it because that's just my personality. Trust me, you do not want to deal with me in the morning. I am not my best self. I am not this happy-go-lucky Angie that you see right now. I really need the mornings to be able to like breathe, drink copious amounts of coffee, and come to center so I can be the happy-go-lucky Angie that you love. But like, be glad you don't live with me. Mornings are not great in Angie lands. Moving on. Let's find an afternoon that works for you.
Do you have one of those coffee cups that says like, don't talk to me, not right now, getting close, maybe later? And it's like, oh my God, dependent on how much coffee you have drank?
No, but I do have, my sister and I have this in common. Like we have a weird mug collection. And when I finally settle down, since I'm a digital nomad, I plan on having like a big mug display so that I can proudly display all of my weird mugs. But I did have for a while a great one, a handmade one that said, have a great day on the side. And then when I drank it, it was flipping the middle finger on the bottom. And I will like in my final days in my day job before I got fed up and I quit to start my own freelance business. I was like, what are you going to do? Fire me? I already freaking quit. So I was taking that mug and just sitting in meetings like, are you getting the message? I don't care. So
right.
Yeah, I'm a little feisty in case you haven't figured that out in episodes of this show.
So if you haven't figured out, note to everybody that's going to be on Angie's podcast, not before noon.
Not before noon. That's the, I need to make that into a tagline or a shirt or something. Not before noon. And that's something that I learned. All of this that we're talking about with these systems, by the way, is trial and error. It's not like I woke up one day, took a CEO day and said, this is the system that is going to work for me from now until perpetuity. I started with going, okay, calls on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and then went, crap, not in the mornings. No, not in the mornings. So now it's calls on Thursdays from 2 a.m. Or 12 p.m. to like, I think it was 5 p.m. I just had 5 hours of calls available. Well, then I started running into problems where like folks in Europe didn't have any suitable times to talk to me, and folks in Australia didn't have any suitable times to talk to me. So then it was like, okay, on certain days and certain periods, if I know that somebody from Europe is going to get on the phone with me, I will release a certain amount of spots from like 10 a.m. so that we can talk. And that will still give me some time to kind of get my head on straight, even if I won't be 100%. And then some days I keep appointments later until like 7 or 8 p.m. so that I can have some reasonable hours for people overseas. Like this was just a step-by-step process when I'm talking to people and they're saying, I don't have any times on your calendar that work for me. Is there any wiggle room here? And I would start to make these adjustments. It's just a process. So like give yourself grace and freedom to experiment.
And even as the systems, expert I am and the ClickUp expert that I am, we actually just changed our social media process this year. We changed how we're doing stuff. And it's more about like the strategy, but then there's also a process that, that has to go along with that. And so I am constantly, if you will, auditing my own systems and improving them. And then also, since it's like my, zone of genius, I love it because I can then give it to other people and say, here's this awesome new system I've done, or, try it out. Let me know if you like it. Or I can give people tips around this. So I often have a lot of people in my DMs asking me, like, I do X, Y, and Z, but I don't know how to get a handle on this. And so I can ask them more about their personal stuff. And for me, since I have created, systems for the last 3 years, I can think of different ways, but I always in the conversation with this is trial and error. So the thing is this may sound like the perfect thing on paper when you write it all out and you have your brain dump and then you work your little workflow, the whole thing, what I call the fun part, because you get to like draw and you get to, do different things. But
you like color-coded spreadsheets, don't lie.
I don't like spreadsheets, but what I will say though, is whenever that's finished, I always say, you need to test this out.
Mhm.
for a couple of weeks, maybe a month. And if you are not doing it, if you find that you are having your process be overdue and you get to that point like you did Tuesday at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, telling yourself you still have to publish a podcast, the
Yep.
system is not for you. And you
Yeah.
need to go back to the drawing board and you need to figure out what actually works for you. And that's what I
Yes.
mean by having your business in your life versus dictating your life and
Mhm.
controlling your life, you know?
Resistance is just good data. Like,
Yeah.
I don't think shame, I think shame is a ridiculous emotion because it stops us from doing better. And then we just
Yeah.
sit there and we wallow about how shitty we are, and it doesn't actually help us get out of unstuck mode. But if you can
Yes.
look back at it, and that actually, it ties in perfectly with what I told you the podcast process started and what it has evolved into. I sent them that 20-minute panicked rambly video, and she sent me back a process, and we had like documents located in different places. She created a tracking spreadsheet, all of this great stuff. But then we noticed over time, over the next few weeks, that I was the bottleneck in one of the steps, which namely was finding a way to get the recordings from my computer, because I don't record to the cloud because it compresses the mumbo jumbo audio stuff. I record it locally so that I can send the high quality file to my editor. But then I wasn't stopping after everything rendered and moving those files over to the editor. So we did some brainstorming, and this is where I love, letting go of this idea that you have to figure out everything on your own. Bounce ideas around with people that you trust, because when I talked to my VA about like, how do we get this off my computer to an editor in a much more efficient way, you know what we discovered? This is magical. What a time to be alive in technology. Google Drive has an app, and we were already working out of Google Drive anyway. So what we did was we downloaded the app to my desktop and we synced it to the podcast folder on Google Drive. And now I just literally record these files directly to the podcast folder on Google Drive. As soon as I'm done recording and this thing renders, my assistant has access to it because she has access to my Google Drive. Talk about innovative solutions out there. Now I don't need to like psych myself up or judge myself for not doing something as simple as sending recordings to my editor.
Right. Right. Yep. It is interesting. It can be such a time suck, as well as just a mindset issue of getting past this stuff. And one of the biggest things that I always talk about too, another thing that I hear from people is like, well, I only have one client, so I can just do things manually because it doesn't really matter, but I always flip the tables on them. And I always say, build systems for where you want to be, not for where you are right now. And I know that's a very coined term, I know, but I still tell people that because it's so important to remember that what you're doing manually right now with your one client is not going to work when you have 5 clients or when you bring on a virtual assistant. Like, your virtual assistant cannot read your notebook that's on your desk next to you. They are virtual. Right? Like, they can't read your mind. They don't have access. I mean, sometimes they do, but they don't have access, to all your emails, especially right away when you're first, getting them trusting and, all those things. But just, you have to realize that doing stuff manually and not embracing the systems, especially like with what you said in the days that we live in right now of the technology, embracing those things is only going to allow you to grow your business faster. And so if your goal is to have, those 5 clients or 5K months or 10K or whatever those trigger numbers are, and you want to hit those, you have to think about what you would be doing when you're hitting those. And I can guarantee you, it's not you writing on your little sticky note about a task that you need to take care of for the one client that you have.
Right. And, to tie it back into what I was saying with the process, right? It's easy to get stuck in our heads. This, I think, connects to that mindset issue personally, and judge something as only I can do this, or I could actually outsource this, where I think you really do need the help of somebody operationally minded, because they can show you that things that you think are your responsibility and no one else can do, like me moving files from my personal computer over to somewhere where my editor can access. That on the surface, without any other details, does seem like an Angie problem. Angie has to figure out a way to do this. But because I took it to my VA and said, okay, this is a bottleneck, this is an issue, and I'm just not remembering to do it, and I don't want to rush James in his production process because he's a genius, like, let's not put that pressure on him because I can't remember to do this. So what is it? Is it like a reminder ping once a week that says go upload all the files. But then that I'm going to resist too, because I have to create all these different folders and send him like to the 2 audio tracks and stuff like that. So she was the one that pointed out, oh, you know what? If Zoom lets you choose the place that you record to, it's usually a generic Zoom folder if you don't set it manually. So why don't we set it manually to the Google Drive and get you set up with the Google Drive app? And she was the one that found that. And now I take it everywhere on every team that I work on. Do you know that there's a Google Drive app that you can just create it in a local folder and it'll automatically sync?
You just blow everyone's mind.
Right.
Every time. You're like, look at this. Look at what I'm about to show you.
There ain't no turning back. No, there is not.
Yes. And that's also goes back to fostering those communities and relationships with other entrepreneurs and bouncing off those ideas with people that you trust. And because I'm sure that she probably had to research that a little bit, or maybe she even reached out to somebody saying, hey, do you know any way we can, does anybody have any ideas of how we could make this easier? Yeah. And, that also just goes hand in hand of like building, again, those things. And also, if you're in that growth phase, having entrepreneur friends is like, in my opinion, crucial, because I grew my whole business on word of mouth. And having those friends and building those relationships, while I probably haven't worked with most of them, since they know me, they trust me, and they refer me to people. And they're like, hey, you need Kaci. She's the ClickUp queen. She knows everything about ClickUp. Go reach out to her. She's going to get you all squared away. I've had multiple people come and say, like, I heard about you from, X, Y, and Z. And it's just one of my friends that I've built a relationship with. And, we chat almost every day or whatever,
Yeah. And here's something I always get good and ranty about too. If you are somebody that struggles with asking for help, first of all, sending great big hugs, because I grew up in South Texas, land of Southern culture. And like, I will do this myself. I don't want to be a burden on anybody. With all the love I have, stop it. Stop that nonsense right now. You are not a burden if you ask for help. Trust another person to be an adult and tell you whether or not they have the time and the capacity to help, for one, right? Just ask. Asking is not an obligation. Number 2, if you think about this on the flip side, when I asked for help, and granted I was paying my VA, but she went and found this solution to the problem. I don't know whether she reached out to other people or if she just knew it. But if she didn't know it before I tasked her with finding that solution, now she has a solution that she can turn around and sell to other clients. Yeah. That she can help her network with. So her helping me helped her and helped her future clients. And like, it's a great big old mountain avalanche of help now. Yeah. Because I had the bravery, and, I'm not going to pretend that it's bravery in the, charging into a burning building sense, but I had the bravery to get out of that self-judgment and say, this is holding it up. And it seems like such a stupidly simple thing. Is there any solution that I'm not seeing that we could use to make it so that I'm not the bottleneck anymore? And then she came back with one, and it was awesome.
Yeah. Well, and like you said, so a big piece of this too is also like your self-awareness. So you realized, you know what, I am putting pressure on my team to rush out podcasts because I'm not uploading them when I should. So how do we make this situation better? And that alone is like, I don't really know what I'm thinking of, but like a great CEO mindset, I should say, just because you are so aware of who you are and yourself, and you just know it's not going to happen. Like you're just so honest with it, and that's such a big piece of running a business, because you have now seen like, okay, I need to figure this out so that my team is healthy and my team likes working with me and they're empowered to do a really good job, because I'm not, shoving them 17 podcast episodes that need to go out tomorrow, all, that kind of stuff. And it's almost like you just always want to get better. So it's like a constant like improvement of your business. And I think that that's a super, super important piece of running a business and business growth. And also just yourself. If you know who you are and you're really honest with yourself, it's so easy to, like you said, ask for help, and then also make sure that you're not that bottleneck. And one thing you mentioned about the graphics, about how like it's not Angie dependent. One thing I want to tagline on that is, you creating a graphic for your podcast literally makes you no money.
Yeah.
None.
It cost me money.
Yeah, exactly. So also thinking about that. So when you're in this creative state and you're thinking about the big picture of I have to create all the copy because that's what makes me money, right? Okay, awesome. It does. I have to create all the graphics because I'm a graphic designer. That's what makes me money. Yes, it does. But does emailing your client on an update of where you're at with the project make you money? Probably
Nope.
not. And I can even take it even one step further. And we haven't talked a ton about ClickUp, but ClickUp can actually automate all of that with like a click of a button where it like just sends off a little email saying, we're at this phase of your project. And now you need to fill out this form so that I can continue with the project. It's due on this day.
Nice.
Automated with a click of a button. So there's
That's
so
awesome.
much out there though in this day and age of technology, and then also just support with admin. And you just have to ask yourself when you're auditing yourself and you're auditing your business, if you have this vision of growing and, getting back your time, either, growing in the sense of saving time or even financially, different avenues there. But it all comes down to, with these tasks, do they actually make you money?
Yes.
And if someone else does it, is it still going to be good? Because I remember, I think this was Jenna. I think this was like Jenna Kutcher's. I don't remember who, but one of those big gurus,
Yeah.
She mentioned that a big turning point for her was realizing that it didn't have to be a specific shade of orange. It just needed to be orange. And so she had to stop worrying that it wasn't, this specific shade and that it was just done and it got done and it was out there. And she had to let that go.
Yeah. Done is better than perfect.
Yes, it's better than perfect because now you have your podcast out there and you have your content out there and you have someone supporting you so that you can take Fridays off, or you have ClickUp supporting you to where you don't even have to hire somebody because you're not, necessarily at that point, and you have systems built to kind of trigger off automations. You have a system set for your clients with maybe a dashboard that they log into and can see, the status of their project. There's so many different avenues out there of what you can do. And just the most important thing is allowing you to let things go and really like seeing, obviously my business is, a graphic design business or a podcasting business or whatever, but the key, or the copywriting business, sorry, but the key kicker is all of these admin pieces are really just busy tasks and time sucking tasks, and find ways to either eliminate them or automate them or hire help. Because now you've freed up, I don't even know, hours and hours and hours. And now you can bring on new clients. You can start, doubling your income. You can, or instead of doubling your income, you can keep the income, but then you're working half the time.
Yes.
So you've doubled your income without adding any clients.
More money is not always the answer, guys. Often we expand our lifestyles or our working hours to accommodate the extra hours. So, sometimes it's a good result to cut our time in half and keep the income insane. Keep the income the same. And everything that I just heard you say now is so brilliant. Like, one of the things that I wanted to unpack, like, I think something that holds us back so much, especially folks on the newer end of the spectrum to entrepreneurship, is, they're so afraid of putting themselves out there, but they're almost ashamed to admit to themselves, right? That self-awareness that they're afraid. So they indulge in a lot of busy work, like creating graphics, like obsessing on the perfect shade of orange, stuff that makes them feel very busy and productive, but is costing them money because you're not using that time to make money, right? Or you're literally paying somebody to create something for you instead of making them money. And so that's something that I often challenge my clients with, like, is this costing you money or is this making you money? And I'm not trying to be reductive here or make it like it's all about the money or anything like that. But you have to get real practical sometimes and look at the systems that you've built and what you're doing. Is this costing me money? Is reaching out and manually setting appointments with my clients costing me money? Can I pay $25, $30 for a calendar software and just set my hours once and let people pick their own times on my calendar versus spending hours of back and forth? If you actually calculate out what you charge per hour, whether it's $100, whether it's $500, whatever, if you spent an hour going back and forth trying to set up this meeting, and you charge $500 an hour, you just lost $500 because that was an hour that you couldn't bill somebody for doing actual work because you were setting appointments. Oh,
And another thing too, so you're talking money and you're always like, you do say it's not all about the money, but you can also flip this on a time aspect too. So if people I'm very money driven. So for me, like
me too.
when I think about those things, it's all dollar signs like all the time. I'm like, dollar signs going down the drain or, going in my bank account, those different things. But if that's not what drives you, or if that's not what's important to you, think about this. Is this costing you time or is this saving you time?
Yes.
Same idea.
If I had to schedule all the appointments, do all of the show writing, interface with my editor and everybody, set up all the emails, do all of that manual stuff behind the scenes, I think, and this is just quick math off the top of my head, but that would add another 10 to 15 hours back to my week and make things completely overwhelming.
Which in reality, if we're looking at that, 40-hour work week, that's more than an entire work day.
Yeah.
If you work 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's more.
Wow. Yeah. I hadn't even thought about that. That's like 2 whole days of my week spending on admin tasks that I'm not really suited to. And it would actually take me a hell of a lot longer because that's not a strength of mine to do all of that stuff, versus having it automated, having an assistant to help me with things. And, but again, I want to circle back to all of this. Like, if you are feeling resistance towards systematizing your business, or you're thinking that there's no way that I can handle things off, I want you to look for 2 key signs. And this is going to require some discomfort, some emotional awareness of yourself. But if you are noticing shame around not getting things done, or you're noticing resistance to doing certain tasks, those are things to keep note of. Maybe keep yourself a journal, like stuff I don't want to do, stuff I'm not doing, and start to reach out for help and ask people, is this something a VA can help with? Is this something that Kaci Ackerman can help with? Can we automate this? Shame is a sign. Use it as a tool instead of something to stop yourself.
Yeah. And I want to also just add to that, because I love that idea of like, if you're feeling those things, definitely that's where you can start to audit that situation. Yep. Another thing is, if you have no idea how to get started with systems, so maybe you do know that you need them, you're kind of past the point of the shame or resistance, but you also just don't know how to even figure out those small steps, right? Do exactly what Angie did and literally record yourself, because then you're going to be explaining on the video what you're doing, and you are going to uncover all of those pieces of the system. And that's the biggest piece. So we talk another trigger term in this online space are SOPs and blah, 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 and I always tell people, just start recording Loom videos or whatever software you use, but just start recording videos, because you can hire a VA and tell them, I have videos recorded, but I need your help getting them all written, to where it's actual written process that we can look at and decide if things need to be changed or whatever. A VA can help you with that, because your system is actually probably already there. Now, if you are needing the expert side of things of like, well, I want to make this system better, or I want to optimize it or automate it, then maybe you should be looking for a systems or operations person. But if you're currently like just wanting to get things off your plate and you just don't know how to get started, just start with recording everything you do. That's it.
I was so worried when I made that video, because I felt like I was going to miss steps. But what happened was, and I mentioned the word rambly for a reason, because I was going through it and I told them, I'm just going to pretend like I am publishing an episode from start to finish. And I'm going to do things. And so there were times where I'd stop and go, oh, crap, I forgot a step. Actually, what I would do here is I have to do this thing first so that I can do this next thing that we're going to talk about. And I wound up actually capturing all of it in a very rambly roundabout process. But then she was able to take that, kind of transcribe it, reorganize it, put it in the order that I was doing it, even though I didn't film the best video about it. And then we were able to make it more efficient from there.
Exactly. And so that's the perfect way to get started too. It's just doing that. And I, even to this day, do that. I'll start recording something and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is a total crapshoot, total mess of a video. And then I just hand it off to, I have a VA and also a content person. I hand it off to whichever one. And then if there's any questions, they ask me and we, hash that part of it out. But oftentimes they're like 5-10 minutes of me just literally rambling and like going back and forth on my screen and all of this crazy stuff. Yeah.
Oh man, there's so much goodness here. So much goodness. I think we're going to have to do a part 2, Kaci. I honestly do, because there's so much
love it.
system stuff and like head trash and garbage and resistance around reaching out for help that I really just want to destroy all of that stuff. Ask for help, guys. Everybody out here wants to help somebody else succeed. Like, we all want to be part of that success story and, have somebody on the Oscar stage thanking us for helping them make this possible, right? Like, it takes a village for all of us to succeed. So for now, I will say, fantastic conversation. We'll do a part 2. Tell us more about how to find out about your business and your services.
Yeah. So again, I'm Kaci Ackerman. And that's all of my that's all my social handles. So you can find me on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Kaci Ackerman. My website is Kaci Ackerman as well. If you are just getting started with systems, I do have a freebie out there, 10-step process of how to get started with using ClickUp and building out your business start to finish through ClickUp. So grab that if you are needing to get started. But other than that, come on Instagram. I'm super active there. Say hello. I love connecting with new, people and making new connections.
Awesome. And we'll have clickable links to all of that stuff in the show notes so that people can follow you more easily. Thank you so much for being on the show today. It was a pleasure getting to know you and talking to you and hearing about your expertise.
Thank you so much for having me.
That's all for now. If you want to keep that kick-ass energy high, please take a minute to share this episode with someone that might need a high-octane dose of "you can do it." Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the Permission to Kick-Ass podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you stream your podcasts. I'm your host, Angie Coley, and I'm here rooting for you. Thanks for listening, and let's go kick some ass.